The true history of Nuketown is much darker than you might expect. Now, whether you're a fan of it because of the vibrant, colorful, fast-paced action that you'll get in the multiplayer versions of Nuketown, or you like it because of the much darker and grittier iteration that we got in Nuketown Zombies, I think we can all agree that the map is one of the overall COD fanbase's favorite maps of all time. But underneath all of that, buried at the heart of Nuketown's history, is a dark secret. So, we need to establish where Nuketown sits in the Call of Duty canon. We first laid eyes on Nuketown in 2010 during Call of Duty Black Ops 1, and it was love at first sight. It was high octane, close quarters combat, it was really colorful and vibrant and felt just satisfying to play, and it was packed to the brim with Easter eggs that you really didn't see on other multiplayer maps at the time. For example, the two houses on Nuketown actually belonged to Mason and Woods from the Black Ops 1 campaign. There's also books in Nuketown which have Richtofon's name on them, suggesting that maybe he was involved at the site somehow. And on top of that, you could take the RCXD kill streak, which in itself was kind of iconic for Black Ops 1, and you could drive it out of the map and do some kind of crazy exploration. With that said though, the biggest Easter egg of all was the mannequins that were planted around the map, hidden in plain sight. And if you shot off all of the heads of all the different mannequins, Sympathy for the Devil by the Rolling Stones would start blaring out of the Nuketown speakers, and that's why, to this day, every time there's a new Nuketown iteration, the COD fanbase jumps straight into a private match to try and shoot all the mannequin heads off to see what the new version of the Nuketown Easter egg is going to be this year. So it was super popular very quickly, right? But people weren't really paying a lot of attention to what Nuketown itself was there for. Like, why is this even a map that we're playing on in the first place? Why was it such a good fit for Black Ops 1. Time moved on, we got to Black Ops 2, and this game had multiple Nuketowns present in it because we got Nuketown Zombies and we had a new version of multiplayer Nuketown. In MP, it was even more colorful, even more vibrant, and if you shot all the heads off the mannequins once again, you unlocked arcade games that you could play on the famous and iconic Nuketown sign. And in Zombies, they put in some really cool Easter eggs where, for example, you can hear the transit bus honking on the map. And it's also one of the only Zombies maps in history that's ever taken place concurrent with another Zombies map. So what I mean by that is that we've had similar things done in other maps over the years, like in Terminus and Liberty Falls. The players' actions in those maps take place only one day apart, and the cutscenes for those maps actually happen at the same time. So they're very nearly concurrent, but in Nuketown Zombies, we see the eye colors of the zombies flip over as we progress through the rounds, and that's to indicate that up on the moon, where the Ultimus crew are currently doing the moon Easter egg, they've just opened up the MPD, and they've gotten to the point where Richtofen has seized control of the ether, and that's why the new eye colors are now present on Nuketown as well. So I think that's so cool. It's such a sick piece of attention to detail, and it was cool because it started to really galvanize people's interest into what the underlying significance of Nuketown itself could be. You see, for Zombies players, we don't see a new Zombies map and just go, oh, well, we're in a new place now. Fine, not gonna pay any attention to it. Nope, that's not the Zombies way. So there was a lot of digging into, okay, why is it that the perks, for example, are landing in this specific site in Nuketown? And what's the deal with this thing? So this is a massive drill that we see on one of the comic book loading screens for Call of Duty Zombies, and this has inspired endless amounts of discussion and confusion over the years. It's highly mysterious. So in these shots, you see someone that looks like they might be a Nuketown Zombies character, like one of the CDC cleanup crew, except they've got a slightly different version of their outfit on, and it's maybe some kind of flight mask, like an oxygen flight mask, something like that, and there's an enormous drill. But that doesn't really make sense because in Nuketown Zombies itself, we don't see any of this stuff. We don't see this weird kind of flight plane wing thing. We don't see the massive drill structure. We don't see the massive crater, although there are a lot of craters in Nuketown, and even the loading screen of Nuketown Zombies is in a crater, so maybe there's some connection there. There's so much mystery associated with this thing, and to this day, people aren't exactly sure what it is. Now, one of the working theories is that there's a Revelations cipher which calls out, for the first time ever, by the way, in Zombies history, the relevance of Venus in the Zombies story. The cipher says October NSA report, and that stands for National Security Agency. So straight away, we're kind of in line with the fact that the CDC are there for cleanup of the Nuketown site and the NSA are getting involved potentially. It goes on to say they found the source on Venus beginning extraction. And so the question is Nuketown Zombies low-key not taking place on Earth, but is it actually taking place on Venus? That's maybe a little far-fetched for the map itself to be on Venus, but certainly the loading screen could well be a shot of some kind of source being extracted from Venus, which is so wild to think about because we don't go to other planets in COD Zombies. We go to the moon, and that's the furthest we've ever been. But the idea of exploring the whole solar system and potentially finding 115, if that's the source, or some other element of some kind. I mean, maybe it's prima materia for all we know. That being on Venus is kind of mind-blowing. And it's a secret that a lot of people have never even paid any attention to because it's in Nuketown Zombies, not in the main Nuketown. So let's move back to the multiplayer Nuketowns now to uncover some stuff there, and then we'll return back to this zombies theory in a moment. So the Black Ops 3 version of Nuketown was yet again even more colorful, and it actually had multiple versions of the mannequins Easter eggs. So you could shoot all their heads off and then get chased around by zombie mannequins. But if you shot the heads off and the arms off, and I think this is a Doctor Who reference potentially, they would basically turn into the weeping angels from Doctor Who, where they would chase you, and then if you turned around and looked at them, they would all freeze. And then if you turned around again and you weren't looking, they'd start chasing, and then as soon as you turned back, they'd freeze again. It was super creepy. Then in the Black Ops 4 version of Nuketown, we had this Russian nuclear test site, and the RCXD Easter egg allowed you to go down a vent and actually see a nuke, like in construction, being prepped for launch potentially. And the mannequins Easter egg allowed you to basically launch a nuke that would then cause mannequins to start falling from the sky and then start attacking you. Now, Black Ops 4 took a leaf out of Black Ops 2's book, and it brought back Nuketown as a zombies map once again, but this time it was a main DLC called Alpha Omega. And in Alpha Omega, we learn some really fascinating backstory about a lot of the original zombies characters, like Tank Dempsey, for example. And the map also cleared up a lot of questions that we've had kind of lingering for years in the zombies community about this guy in the spawn room of Shino Numa. So when you spawn in on Shino, you see this body and you're like, what the hell's that doing there? Why is this guy just hanging from the rafters? And you then start connecting dots and you're like, okay, there was a hand on the power switch in Verrucht, and now this guy's missing an arm. And there's no power switch on Shino, so it must be that that's his arm on the power switch, and he then parachuted in to the Rising Sun facility. But why is he there? Then if you activate the radio in the spawn of Shino Numa, it addresses this character and addresses him as Peter. So his fate kind of seemed sealed, but then in Black Ops 3, in the Gorod Krovi intro, Peter McCain is parachuting down into Stalingrad instead of the Rising Sun facility? So what the hell's going on there? But Alpha Omega helps clear up a lot of that stuff, as does the zombies timeline, but it also tells us that back in the day, before all this stuff happened, if we go back to the days of Verrucht and earlier, Peter and Dempsey actually knew one another, and Dempsey was tasked with trying to extract Peter from Verrucht once he was captured, because it was unearthed that he was actually a spy who had infiltrated Group 935. Now, I've done a lot of story videos about this topic, so I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but the sort of secret that Alpha Omega reveals is that Peter had feelings for this woman called Phoebe, but then Dempsey basically stole Phoebe away from Peter, and that created some friction between the two. So Nuketown has been the source of kind of love triangles over the years, as well as some of the kind of dark secrets that we're going to get onto here. But honestly, I feel like Dempsey kind of stealing someone's wife or stealing someone's girl is kind of a dark secret in itself, right? Now, in Black Ops Cold War, we got a different version of Nuketown, and this one was weird because it was like a sister site to the original Nuketown, and if you looked out of the map, you could see a crater in the distance. Now, we've talked about craters being important in this video earlier on, but this one was assumed to just be the original Nuketown site. There's also an Easter egg on the map that makes reference to the Indiana Jones movie, The Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. So basically on the map, you can find a fridge similar to the one that you see in the movie, and inside the fridge is a hat, and that's a reference to Indiana surviving a nuclear blast inside the fridge. So that was a fun little meta reference to a different kind of IP, but then in Black Ops 6, that Nuketown Easter egg was even more meta because it kind of put you in the game. So if you shoot all the heads off the mannequins, the map is turned into a TV set, and you're basically placed inside that TV set. And so you're playing as yourself, and yourself is playing a character in the TV set being attacked by the zombie mannequins. It's kind of wild. And there's even a live audience that will boo you if you do badly and cheer you if you do well, making it even more meta. It's kind of like if Gladiator was set in Nuketown instead of in a Coliseum. So with all these different versions of the map and all these different mannequin Easter eggs as well, it starts to pose the question, why is it that Treyarch is spending so much time and attention on making these eggs in the first place and making them in the way that they are? Is there some kind of underlying reflection that they want us to do when we're playing a character of ourselves and these lifeless mannequins are coming to attack us? Like, is there some kind of underlying symbolism there or some kind of intention to what they're crafting for us? I think I have partly an answer to that for you today. So with the original Nuketown in Black Ops 1, it wasn't just something that they dreamed up like, hey, it would be really cool to have a really tiny map, which is just 2 houses and that's it. And it would be a really small town and it'll be really fast paced because of it. And great, perfect. We're done. Instead, what happened is a senior level designer at Treyarch called Adam Hoggart got an email one day from a notorious ex-Call of Duty developer. He's no longer with the company, but his name is David Vonderhaar. And Dave said, hey Adam, I've been looking into the real stories of these fake towns that they created during the Cold War to test the efficacy of nuclear weapons, and I feel like this might be really interesting to use as the backdrop for a multiplayer map. And so yes, just to be absolutely clear with you here, that means that Nuketown is based on something that exists in real life. The story goes that from 1951 right through to as late as 1992, so essentially the complete span of the Cold War itself, the United States had multiple active nuclear testing sites where it tested out explosives from just regular bombs all the way through to things the size of actual nukes. The Nevada test site was 65 miles north of Las Vegas, and the United States government carried out over 1,000 tests on that Nevada site, which is what the Nuketown map itself is inspired by, the Nevada site specifically. But they did all that testing on their own soil just so that they could try and keep pace with the Soviets in the nuclear arms race taking place in the late 50s, 60s, and early 70s. The reason they were doing it in Nevada is that originally they were like, yeah, we'll just do it in the Pacific, that'll be fine, but it became too costly for them to do it there, and also just too dangerous. And so they started looking for safe places to do it. And so they were like, okay, why don't we just make our own safe place to do it? But we need to use something to measure how effective it's going to be to obliterate whoever we're trying to bomb. So they built fake towns with fake houses and fake families made of mannequins. That's a real thing. And they filled them with everyday items as well. So there would be cutlery on the table. There'd be baking trays in the oven. There'd be a fridge. And at the same time that they were doing all this stuff, they were making propaganda films and informational videos for the American peoples to say, okay, guys, we recognize right now that we're in a war, except we're not in a war. Like, it was this weird, we are, but we aren't, because it was the Cold War. But because of that, here's some instructional videos for you to follow for if you are caught in a nuclear blast. And these are just so creepy to take a look at now.
The first job is to look over your own home for shelter possibilities. If you live in a private home that is well built, the cellar is the safest place to be. The lower you get, the more barriers there are likely to be against blast, heat, and radioactivity. Select the basement wall nearest the probable target area of your city. If the house is blown over, it will most likely fall away from this wall. If you have a workbench or strong table big enough to get under, move it into your shelter area near a wall or strong supporting column. If the time comes when you actually have to take shelter, lie under the table.
And so as you just heard, hiding in underground bunkers was recommended. And that is why in the Nuketown multiplayer map, we see this underground bunker and why that plays a part in the Nuketown Zombies version of the map in Black Ops 2.
If you live in a home that has no basement, choose a shelter area without windows on the ground floor. An interior hallway is probably best. In time of emergency, the shelter area should be cleared of mirrors and other objects that might cause injury. If you live in an apartment house, rules for taking shelter will be posted in your building. Learn them. Also, learn the location of public shelters in areas where you work or frequently visit. Taking shelter may be a race against time, even when you have some advance warning. But possibly, there may be no time. An attack could come without warning. The sky would suddenly light up. If a doorway is right at hand, use it. If the nearest shelter is more than a couple of steps away, fall to the ground immediately. Flying glass and debris are immediate danger, so stay where you are until you're sure it's safe to move.
Now, out of the roughly 1,000 tests that were carried out at the Nevada site, 100 of these were known as atmospheric shots. And these were ones that take place not on the ground itself inside the town, but above the town, and that's what creates the mushroom cloud that has become so synonymous with nukes in media and also obviously in games. The mushroom clouds themselves were so large that they could be seen up to 100 miles away, which is a really long way if you're from the UK like I am. It's slightly less of a long way if you're from the US, and those distances are just something you drive in an afternoon. But remember, I said that this Nevada test site was only 65 miles north of Las Vegas. And so Las Vegas actually experienced a surge in tourism because people would flock to the city just to see the mushroom clouds being blown up on a regular basis by the US government just 65 miles north. Some casinos even created these things called dawn parties, where they would invite guests to try and see specific mushroom cloud activations, and the parties themselves would be atomic themed as well. There were also calendars throughout the city which would advertise when certain nukes were going to go off, and viewing decks so that people could get the best possible views of the mushroom clouds or the atomic flashes. So this is wild, right? That it literally became a tourist attraction, but there's an underlying secret here that people weren't aware of at the time that was a pretty nasty twist in the tale. So the Nuketown site was being run by this company called the Atomic Energy Commission. And to begin with, and for a long time, they reassured people in Las Vegas that it's actually just the same amount of radiation you experience in daily life. Maybe it's a very minor increase from that, but it's nothing to worry about, right? Like, this is safe. And they thought that it wouldn't have an impact on the surrounding environment of the area, whether it would be wildlife, the geology of Earth itself. They were like, no, like weather systems, nah, it'll be fine. However, recently declassified documents have revealed, and I'm going to read from them here, that radiation from the tests drifted across most of the United States, St. George, Utah being one major example of this. Wind currents caused residents of Utah to be affected by the radiation, and the particles from the radiation entered the body through contaminated food, drinks, and air, and eventually led to cancer and birth defects. Residents were not warned of possible health risks by the government, and this led to an increase in cancer rates in the area between 1950 and 1980. And many citizens of St. George and several other surrounding areas now believe that the testing has caused not just cancer, but deaths and a variety of health issues in their families for generations. So it's wild to think that the United States was nuking itself and killing its own people in the name of potentially needing to use these nukes in the future, but also maybe not needing them, with this phantom enemy, Russia, who they weren't even technically at war with. And the fallout from this, pun intended, caused the United States government to create this thing called the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act. So this was in 1990, decades later, after decades and decades of campaigning, and it was designed to pay out to people who'd been affected by the radiation exposure in the area. And so far, to this day, $2 billion have been paid out to those people, and there's over 30,000 of them. Now, interestingly, despite the fact that the United States was well aware that this was starting to cause problems, they actually kept the Nuketown tests going. It's just that they changed the way that they worked. So originally, like I said, they were blowing up nukes above the site itself, and that was causing these massive mushroom clouds. And there was also testing happening underwater and in space. But eventually, the US, the UK, and Russia agreed that they would stop doing that, but there was a little loophole in that agreement, which is that they could still do tests underground. And so those continued all the way up until the end of the Cold War in 1992. And not only that, but they actually kept the Nuketown site preserved, and it's still an active US base to this day. It's not something that they can use to test nuclear weapons, but if the US ever decided to yield on its agreement to only do its testing underground, then they could restart activities at that site once again, should they so desire to. But I feel like the population of Las Vegas might be pretty upset with that. And so my theory is that through all of these mannequin Easter eggs that Treyarch have been doing over the years, they might have been trying to sneak in a little bit of potentially political ideology related to nuclear disarmament and the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. Because if you think about it, in real life, it was meant to just be mannequins that were being bombed, and mannequins are just static and lifeless and dead. But in real life, what happened is it was real humans living their daily lives who ended up facing the consequences of these tests. And so I feel like Treyarch is kind of leaning into that by saying, if we kind of poke the mannequins in the right way, by shooting their heads off, we can suddenly make them come alive, and we realize that there is actually some life to them after all, and we shouldn't just be completely blazingly bombing this place because there's a lot of collateral damage that happens when we do so. It's like it's the human populace fighting back against the fact that they're being nuked and saying, hold on, we're alive here and we want nuclear disarmament. Like, we don't want these tests to continue. And so those campaigns over the years to get compensation for having been nuked, I think, is almost kind of represented in the struggle and the plight of the mannequins to fight back against us, the player, as we go about the Nuketown site doing what it was designed for, which is just dropping nukes on it. So whichever angle you look at it from, whether it's the multiplayer side, the Black Ops 2 side with Nuketown zombies, the Black Ops 4 side, the Cold War side, there's very clearly a lot of different messaging that is brought to your attention by the maps. And I think it's safe to say that in all of that messaging, there is an underlying dark secret that's waiting to be uncovered by you if you just pay enough attention. So let me know what you think of my theory today, guys. And right here on the screen, I've got another video that I think you're going to really love. So if you click through to that now, it'll start from the top and you'll be able to learn even more. I'll see you there.